Hello, everybody. I'm Janet Lee, the author of Gentleman Jack, Lessons in Breaking Rules and Living Out Loud. We're so happy to welcome you to this session of the Ann Lister Research Summit. The title is New Books for Your Ann Lister Bookshelf. Joining me today is Adeline Lim from Sydney, Australia, the author of In the Footsteps of Ann Lister. Also, Angela Clare, who writes under the name Clara Barley, the author of The Moss House. And somewhere in the ethers, there's Lynn Farrell, who is the author of Ann Lister, Ann Walker, and Me. Lynn, I think the plan is they're going to somehow figure out how to put you with the rest of us, but I'm glad to see your face and glad that you're here.
Okie dokie. I don't know why it's not working, but yeah.
There you go. Welcome, Lynn.
Hiya. Hi, everybody.
You know, I think that we're all very well aware of the impact that Gentleman Jack has had on so many of us. You know, it was a life-changing experience for so many. It turned many of us into fangirls. It made us travel. People began pursuing all manner of research, and we all took a hand at some artistic impressions and expressions. And so pretty soon you're going to see on the screen our book covers. I chose to write about the global impact of Gentleman Jack on our community. Adeline wrote an Ann Lister travelogue that I always describe as TripAdvisor for the 19th century. Angela has written several things in her job as collection manager at the Calderdale Museums, but this is her first novel about the exploring the romance between Ann Lister and Ann Walker. And Lynn is a former physics book writer, and she's writing a book that's not scientifically related for the first time, based on her transcriptions of Ann Lister's journals. So today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how we approached our book, and we're going to talk about what's in it and give you a feel for what you would find if you open up our books, and also give you a little hint of what we're doing in the future. So I'll start with what happened to me as a result of Gentleman Jack. You know, I'll admit it made me half crazy. I was not familiar at all with Ann Lister, and I was so taken by this amazing program about an historical figure that lived so authentically and was so interesting and had such a sense of adventure. And I found myself watching this program over and over. I wanted to know everything I could find about Ann Lister. I got involved in social media, and what I observed was that I wasn't the only one having this incredible reaction to a television show. In fact, I was so curious about how it was affecting other people that I decided to conduct a Facebook survey. And this happened about exactly 2 years ago. And I asked people how Gentleman Jack was affecting them. And it was astonishing that everyone reported some degree of obsession. So what happened to me was I described myself as really being a Lister maniac. I just couldn't figure things out. So I did this survey, and it prompted me to take a trip to Halifax. Next. And while I was in Halifax, it became pretty clear to me that something big was going on. Women were pouring into this community to experience where Ann Lister had lived, where she had gone to church, just the things that she had done. So I left Halifax thinking I had an interesting topic for a book. And so what I started doing at that point was I decided that I would interview people around the world to get a sense of what was happening with them. Kat, you can move the slide again. And so what I did was I interviewed men and women, young and old, all around the world, 16 countries, to get a sense of how Gentleman Jack had impacted them. And what I learned was really remarkable and astonishing. I heard stories over and over of discovery, of transformation, of people being so excited to belong to a global community of like-minded women. And so I discovered that people were feeling really proud. They had a newfound confidence they had never had before. they were so thrilled to be making friends around the world. And there was just something incredibly powerful happening around the world. So what I did was I took the interviews that I had conducted during the pandemic and organized them into 7 chapters. Next slide, please. And I started my book with a discussion of courage and confidence. You know, Ann Lister was such a remarkable woman for her day. She would be remarkable if she was living today. And her example inspired people to do things they had not done before. In the chapter of my book called Confidence and Courage, you'll read about women coming out. You'll read about people falling in love. You'll read about people changing jobs, making these enormous changes in their lives because they were inspired by somebody who lived a couple hundred years ago. In fact, one of the themes that ran through so many of my interviews was the statement, you know, if Ann Lister could do what she did 200 years ago, I can certainly do what I need to do now. Next, please. The other group of people that I wanted to talk to are people who live in Halifax. I talked to 15 people in Halifax to find out what it was like to be in Ann Lister's hometown and what it was like to now be the hottest lesbian mecca in the world. And what I found 2-1 is everybody is so proud of Ann Lister and has so much admiration and respect for her, and they have amazing stories to share. Next. And then those of you who are attending this summit are probably interested in the level of research that's being done about Ann Lister and Ann Walker. And so I talked to people who were transcribing Ann's journals. I talked to people who were going to the archives for the first time. And what emerged from those conversations was this feeling of connection to Ann Lister and to Ann Walker. You know, those people who've been transcribing her diaries feel like they know her because they've been in her head, they've been in her handwriting. And so that's a really interesting group of people that I met through this research that I was conducting. Next, and then there are the adventure seekers. I mean, maybe Ann Lister's adventure spirit is contagious for all of us. I spoke to every one of the 14 women who are training to climb Mount Vinyamal, the peak that Ann Lister climbed for the first time in 1838. She was the first person in the world to reach the summit. Those are very interesting stories of stretching yourself, doing something that you're not sure you're capable of doing, but really wanting to try. And there's another wonderful story in the Adventure Seeker section that Adeline's going to tell you about. She's been on a series of adventures of her own. Next. And then I came to the conclusion that what I was discovering in all of these conversations with people around the world were 4 different things. People feel so connected to one another now. They also feel connected to themselves in a way that they never have before. I always say that the people I talk to they're remarkable by themselves, but they're even more remarkable for having been influenced by a television show that introduced them to Ann Lister and Ann Walker. The other thing Gentleman Jack did was it really sparked tremendous curiosity among so many of us. We wanted to know more about this real person. While we loved Sir Ann Jones's performance, and that was awesome, what we really wanted to explore in more depth was the actual people that the story's about. So there are people who are, of course, pursuing their interest in Ann Walker or Ann Lister or both. And the other thing that has emerged that I think will be the most long-lasting thing about Gentleman Jack is the community that it's created. There are now thousands and thousands of people connected who otherwise would not know each other. And out of that community has come really strong friendships, a level of support that I think makes it possible for people to continue to express their confidence and courage. And all of that combined, I think, has generated transformations around the world, real measurable change in people. And I think seeing that experience of people across the board, men and women, was really an astonishing discovery for me. So at the end of my almost 2 years of working on this book, I came to the conclusion that what a television show can do is truly remarkable. And it will be very interesting to see how we remain connected and what season 2 brings. Next. So what's next for me? People have said, well, when are you going to write the second volume? And I just kind of shake a bit since it's only been about a month since I finished the first volume. So what I'm working on right now is I'm going to start a weekly blog in November. And I'm also going to include story updates, because once you read about these really remarkable people, you kind of want to follow them. You want to know what they're doing next and what's happening. So I think the way to do that is through some online forum. One of the things I'd like to invite you all to do, if you're interested, is to sign up for my email list so that I can make sure that you get the blogs and story updates. And you'll see on the screen this really lovely watercolor that Brian Hildred painted. He is a local artist in Halifax, and he has made that available to me so that when you sign up for my email list, you can download a copy of Brian's lovely watercolor. And also he's given me a picture of Saran Jones as Ann Lister that I'll also throw in the mix. So that's kind of where I am and what I'm doing. And so now what I'd like to do is I'd like to turn over the screen to Adeline Lim to talk about her new book.
Thanks, Janet. So this book is basically about Ann Lister's life in 1833. It covers 6 months of it, from June through to December, when she was traveling all the way from Halifax to Denmark. She left, according to Gentleman Jack, the TV series, because she was heartbroken. And this book came about because my dog passed away, and I had to kind of do something to divert myself. It's a fun book. It's actually quite lighthearted. It follows Anne through all France, a little bit of Luxembourg. She skirts it a little bit, and then Germany, Denmark, and all the way back. So that's her route. I think the fun bits are all around Germany. And when I watched Gentleman Jack, I think there were 2 things that really stood out for me. The Hercules Monument in Kassel, and then reading Anne Choma's book, the Bremen Bleikeller, where the dead bodies were also very interesting. So I just felt that at some point I wanted to get out and see this place, these places. That's Kassel, as you can see. That's where Ann Lister went to the Hercules Monument. She climbed up there. It was actually a very big park, and in the show, it was basically her and Sophie looking at this. It looks a bit different from the show, and it's quite a few steps going up and coming down. When I did this, it was actually quite cool, and but I think when Ann Lister did it, it was actually quite a warm day. Next slide. And this was in Lübeck, one of the prettier places, I think, that Ann Lister went to. She wrote that this place was, it had statues on bridges, and she described this door actually really, really well. And the nice thing about Lübeck is not only did a lot of things that Ann Lister saw still stands today, you can actually go to the museum, which is actually called St. Anne's Museum, and you can see things like the statues and the astronomical clock that she mentioned. Now this is interesting. So on Anne's route coming back from Denmark, she mentioned getting through this great body of water, which is called the Great Belt. And of course she got sick, she puked. So I was there in July, I think, and it's supposed to be summer, but it was actually quite cold, and I was standing there. There was a lot of wind. the water was still quite rough and the water was really, really cold. So to think that in the summer, for us, it is not exactly the most comfortable of an environment. How would she have felt when she was crossing it sometime, I think, in December? So it would have been pretty awful, I think. And the boat that they were in was quite small. And there was spray coming over it as well. So what's next for me? I'm actually writing book 2. And book 2 is about enlisters. I can see your message, Yaneka. Book 2 is about 1829 and 1827. I like to do more travels. I have actually traveled to 139 of enlisters destinations. I actually said to you, Janet, that it was 130, but I actually pulled out the map the other day and had a look, and yeah, it was 139 places. So they aren't sites, they are cities. So if you, for example, if I went to Nancy, maybe I went to about 5 or 10 places, but they would be just one dot. So basically I've been to 139 cities or villages in Europe, most of it concentrated around Germany, France, Denmark. I did quite a lot of south of France recently and a bit of Spain. She's been to some really, really amazing places. And I think with Anne Lister, what she wrote about going abroad, very likely to do good and people shouldn't stay at home. I think that really resonates with me. And what's really important as well is that she could have her sorry, the messages have come through. Anne Lister really wrote her own destiny. She wanted to see the world, basically. She wanted to see what she could see, and she managed to do that. And I think for a lot of us, we can write our own destiny. We can write our own fates, and we should try to do that.
Adeline, thank you very much. That's it's remarkable that you have been able to visit so many places that Anne went and share that with us. Next, we're going to hear from Angela Clare, aka Clara Barley, about the novel she has written about the romance between Anne Walker and Anne Lister.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. I attended last year and didn't think I'd be speaking, so here I am. Thanks for having me. Yeah, and mine is fiction. So this is my take, totally kind of from my own head. So I apologise for those who've really researched since Gentleman Jack has come out and found out things that might not be correct in the Moss House. But this was written back in 2016, pre-Sally, pre-Saran Jones, pre the phenomena that is now the international icon, Anne Lister. This was my way of kind of telling this amazing story that I just knew was so complex and engaging and amazing. And to me, I thought this would make a good TV series, but I didn't know how to do that. I thought it would make a good performance, first-person performance to be done at Shipton Hall, but again, I didn't feel like I was the right person to play her. And I just started writing, and it became this novel. And I finished it in 2018 because I'd written it, and I didn't think there was necessarily an audience for it, and I thought I'd struggle to find a publisher, so I put it in a drawer. And then a few years later, obviously met Sally, and she was keen to do this TV series based on Shipton Hall and Anne Lister. So I thought I'd better fish that out before anybody else writes it, and polished it off, and it went to the publisher in 2018, and it came out in 2019. So it's not particularly new, it's been around for a while, but obviously we've had a year and a bit of closures and bookshops being shut, but it has been out since summer 2019. So my background was I worked at the Royal Armouries in Leeds. I'm a women's historian really by trade and education, a degree and a master's. I started at Bankfield Museum, which is Calderdale Museum's main museum site in Halifax, back in 2013 doing a First World War exhibition, which was my kind of main specialism at the time, women's roles in the First World War. And then I became collections manager, which also involved Shibden Hall. And I'm afraid I'd never heard of Anne Lister, despite doing a master's in gender studies and women's history, and just in Leeds down the road, in fact. And I just thought it was an amazing story, amazing woman. The fact that she left these incredible 5 million plus words of information about everything is just amazing and unprecedented. And it's wonderful to have an LGBTQ story that's so explicit, for want of another phrase. You know, you can't deny that she was gay. She was definitely a lesbian. And that's what gives, it's nice as a historian to be confident in talking about somebody and their sexuality and their gender. I mean, there's still so much more to discover and explore, obviously. But we weren't just assuming she was, we know she is, which again, I think that's part of what makes her so remarkable, that we have this documented evidence of her relationships and her desires and sexuality. Oh, I could talk all day, so I've got I'll keep to the point. So I wrote this novel quite a while ago. It really stemmed from after I started, I was very keen to share this story, thinking of different ways to do it. We did an interview with Helena back in 2015. I think we recorded it. And basically it was me just asking loads of questions about Anne Lister. At this point, I didn't really know too much. And just everything Helena said was kind of jaw-dropping. And I just thought, this is amazing. You couldn't make this story up. It's just fascinating. Also very tragic. She never seemed to quite find true love. And then obviously there were books at the time. There were books, 2 books by Helena and 3 books by Joel Livingston, but that was it. There wasn't all the masses of research that's been done since. So I really just based it on a chronology of Anne Lister and the key things that happened to her, a lot of which I didn't know too much about. I just knew, you know, this happened. So my interpretation is first person, what I think Anne might have thought. I didn't go with the diary voice, because to me the diary is very much a record, and sometimes she says something and you really want to know what she felt really deep down about it. And I think that's where the novel for me was a way of exploring that and making her relatable, I suppose, and getting into her head. And it felt very easy for me to include Anne Walker, because at the time so little was known. I had like 5 bullet points about Anne Lister, about Anne Walker, and that was it. So to me, these 2 voices, sometimes at loggerheads, but obviously falling in love, and then being very different women, very different backgrounds, and very different things that had happened to them. I just kind of, you know, it just kind of wrote itself in a way. I think I felt a lot of empathy for her, for a situation where she just wanted somebody to live with her at Shibden. I also felt a lot of her frustrations as a woman 200 years ago, not being able to vote, not being able to go to be educated other than paying for it yourself. You know, the fact that so many occupations were barred to her, and that travel was much more difficult for especially a single woman to do. So yeah, I just kind of included lots of things that I hopefully have explored in the novel, including sex scenes, because you can't really write about Anne Lister and not include those. I think because that's the key thing that the diaries have in the coded sections is, you know, her description of having sex with women, and I think you can't skirt over that. But then in the diaries, it's interesting that she mentions it, but she doesn't, to me, say too much about how it makes her feel. So for me, I wanted to explore that more in those scenes, and from both Anne Lister and Anne Walker's point of view. Obviously, it was nerve-wracking publishing back in 2019. It had gone to publisher in 2018, so I didn't really know what the TV series was going to be like. So it was quite nerve-wracking to see how our 2 Annes fitted together, I suppose. So I think they're kind of complementary in a way. I know I saw an interview with Sally where she said she can't wait to see how many other interpretations there are. I always think of it like the Brontes, like how many times their novels have been interpreted and their own story has been interpreted. And I think we've got so many more things that are going to come out about Anne Lister, both fiction and non-fiction. So it's quite exciting. And to finish up, I've got another book coming out hopefully next year, and that's exploring Anne Lister's relationship with Mariana, which is just incredible. Again, you couldn't make it up. If you wrote it as pure fiction, you'd be thinking that would never happen, but it did. So yeah, and that's Mariana and also her sisters and all that goes on throughout Anne's lifetime. It's a kind of prequel to the Moss House, but it also goes on beyond the Moss House, and we hear from Anne Walker again. So yeah, it's quite tragic and sad, I'm afraid. But again, I try to make it hopefully some funny bits in there. And now that there's so much more information about Anne, I think this one, you know, there's a lot more in it, and it's almost like in jokes, things that we've discovered since. And yeah, so there's a lot more to it. So hopefully that'll be out in 2022. And yeah, and I'm still working at Shibden Hall and trying to share the story as best we can. So yes, it's lovely to be here, and I will be speaking again on Sunday at 5:30 with my curator hat on, rather than as Clara Barley. I published as Clara Barley just to be clear that it wasn't like a definitive biography of Anne Lister. So that's the one that's the official kind of beginner's guide and about the collections at Halifax. And then obviously the Moss House is Clara Barley's effort of sharing that story quite intimately from Anne Lister and Anne Walker's perspective. So do give it a try, see what you think. I'm always keen to hear back from people, and yeah, there's still a chance to feed in to what goes into the Meer side, which is the sequel prequel, which will hopefully be out next year. So fingers crossed. I could talk all day. I think I've covered everything. You have to ask more questions, Janet. I'm sure you'll come back to me about some of those.
Thank you so much, Angela. I know everybody. I was just noticing earlier today that you have 86 reviews on Amazon, all very positive. So congrats on that accomplishment of appealing to a certain audience. And one of the things that you may not know about Angela is that she actually appears in the Gentleman Jack series. I believe it is it episode 7 or so, 7 or 8?
Yeah, episode 7. Originally I was supposed to be in it a bit more, but they film loads of stuff and then they cut it down and down. So, but yeah, episode 7, I'm in it a few times fleetingly. So look out for me as Mrs. Watson.
Yes, be on the lookout for tall Mrs. Watson when you're rewatching the series for the umpteenth time. Thanks again, Angela. So now we're going to move on to another kind of new book. This is a book written by Lynn Farrell about her experiences as she interpreted and transcribed Anne Lister's journals. Lynn?
Well, first of all, just let me thank you for this chance to sit here and talk about Anne Lister, Anne Walker, and my book, because they're my 3 favourite topics of conversation. So, but like Janet, I need to take us back to May 2019 and that amazing television series, that BBC HBO Gentleman Jack, which absolutely blew me away. I think that's what you said, didn't you, Janet? Absolutely incredible. I had actually already visited Shibden Hall before that series came out, and I was already aware of the relationship between Anne Lister and Anne Walker, but I hadn't really felt sort of engaged with the story. And then the TV show came out, and it was so brilliantly acted and so brilliantly written. It just brought them to life for me. And that was a sort of a real light bulb moment. I was just thrilled to bits with it. I joined a Gentleman Jack Facebook group, and I must have been a bit late joining, because when I joined there was 10,000 members. I mean, that was incredible, absolutely incredible. And now what I found on that Facebook group was that West Yorkshire Archive Service were looking for people to transcribe the diaries, because as we all know, the diaries are very difficult to read. And I thought, oh, I fancy having a go at that. So I applied, and they sent me a couple of pages of Anne Lister's diaries. There we are, and I had a go at transcribing them. I sent them back. They were happy with what I did, and so they signed me up as one of their code breakers, as they call us. And then I got stuck into transcribing, and it was incredible. It was quite literally like I was transported back to the early 19th century. It was like going down the time tunnel. That shows my age a bit, but it was just like I was back in Georgian England. I was with Anne Lister and she was talking to me. And that's how it felt every minute that I sat down to transcribe the diaries. And it was just thrilling. And what I then wanted to do, this is sort of autumn, winter of that year, May 9, 2019, I wanted to go to places where she'd been. So obviously I went back to Shipton. So this was now my third visit to Shipton. And then my wife and I went to Halifax Minster. We went to Lightcliffe. And then at Christmas, we went to York because we wanted to see Holy Trinity Church, which actually moved me to tears with emotion. And I can tell you that doesn't happen very often. And we went to Petergate to see where the Belcombs and the Norcliffes had lived, and we went and looked for the Manor School, which we found. It amazes me how many of these buildings are still standing. The Manor School that Anne Lister went to when she was about 14. So, and then carrying on with the transcribing and transcribing from lots of different years, you know, throughout her whole life, because I didn't ask for any particular years to be sent to me. I just did what came, basically. So I've been transcribing from lots of different years, and the result of that is I felt like I was really getting to understand the woman, and really felt like I was connecting with her. And then I think it was one morning in April 2020, we had been in lockdown for a few weeks, and I just woke up one morning, and just as I was waking up, the idea to write a book about Anne Lister popped into my head. And a second later, the title popped into my head, and that was Anne Lister, Anne Walker and Me. And that took me back a bit. I thought, where did that and me bit come from? And then I just thought about it, and I thought, well, everything that had happened in the previous 12 months, and with the transcribing the show, the making visits here, there and everywhere, it was obvious why it was and me, as well as the idea of writing a book. But at that moment, it came as a bit of a surprise, although I have found I usually have my best ideas just as I wake up, or when I'm in the garden anyway. So I then got to work straight away. I called it, I say to work, but it was an absolute labor of love. I didn't find it difficult. I didn't have to force myself to sit down to write. It was just an absolute joy. And took me about 10 months to actually write the first draft, and then lots more months after that to sort of perfect it. So then, sort of to answer the question, how did I approach actually writing it, the actual nitty-gritty of writing it? Well, I wanted the book to have energy. I wanted it to be optimistic. I wanted it to be entertaining. I wanted it to be uplifting, because those are the words I'd use to describe Anne Lister. I wanted it to be accurate. I wanted what I wrote about Anne Lister and Anne Walker's relationship to be correct and true and accurate. And that would mean a lot more transcribing for me. But what I also found was that all the transcribing I'd done, I could actually skim read a page of her diary and zip through a page very quickly to see whether it had something in it I might want to put in the book. And so oh yes, that's the other thing, as Janet mentioned, I've only written physics books up to this point. And as you know, and it's usually the end of any conversation if I even mention that I've written physics books. And you would probably think that's not a very good preparation for writing a historical biography, right? But in actual fact, it turned out to be okay, because when I'm writing a physics book, I'm explaining to the reader, like as if I'm just writing to one person, I'm explaining to the reader why something happens. So that's how I decided to approach this Anne Lister, Anne Walker and Me. I'll describe to the reader what's going on, And but then I'd try and explain why it was going on. And I figured that I could do that because I could go back to different bits of the diaries that I've transcribed to find an explanation for something that was happening further on. And I'm wondering if it's okay if I can just read an excerpt from the book just to illustrate the point, if that's okay. No, it's not that one. It's to do with Anne Walker, and it's to do with how badly she suffered from anxiety. So obviously, as part of the book, as Anne and Anne's relationship develops, the anxiety starts to become more and more of an issue. So I'll just read from the book for you then. There is something else that may have contributed to Anne's suffering so badly from anxiety. In Anne Lister's diary entry for Tuesday, July 9th, 1822, she recorded some comments made by Mr. William Priestley about Anne Walker's father. They were not surprised at Mr. Walker's conduct. This is the quote. His family saw enough. Mr. Priestley said he had been spoilt all his life, and I think it was Mr. Priestley who said that he was sometimes like a madman in his passion. Mr. Priestley said he blackguarded his wife and daughters, which I'm sure you all know means he was verbally abusive to them. So Anne Walker was verbally abused by her father when she was a child, and the fact that it was common knowledge suggested it must have occurred on numerous occasions. And I go on to suggest how that could have resulted in some of the intrusive thoughts that Anne Walker sadly suffered from. So that's how I've tried to write the book, sort of a bit like trying to explain what was going on. Now, the actual chapters, what have I actually included in the book? A bit about Anne and Anne's lives before they got together. I've done a chapter on Anne Lister's oddity. Now, that's Anne Lister's word, not mine. It's basically for her lesbian nature. You know, the way she walked, her mannerisms, the way she dressed, and her love of sex as well. So I wonder if I can give a couple of quotes from the book on Anne Lister's oddity. Is that okay? Right. So on November 25th, 1819, Anne Lister, aged 28, was writing about a conversation she had had with her friend Elizabeth Brown. This led to the subject of my oddity. I owned I was, very. She would never meet another. Such peculiar feelings, peculiar circumstances made me what I was. She said I was very agreeable. Everybody, even those who had only seen me for 5 minutes, all owned this. She liked my oddity. I said I was aware of that. I knew all the ladies did like it. It was my oddity that made me so agreeable. So I've got that quote. There's another quote I really must add. Because, of course, as Angela was mentioning, sex was very important to Anne Lister. So Anne Lister longed for female company. So, of course, there were to be other women in her life to make up for the long separations from Mariana. She frequently stayed at Langton Hall, the home of the Nautilus just outside York. On one such occasion, she had an extended winter stay from October 5th, 1820, till January 8th, 1821. During her stay, she enjoyed the company of her dear friend Isabella and her younger sister Charlotte, their friend Mary Valance, Anne Belcombe, and her married sister Harriet Milne. Well, there was flirting with Harriet and kissing with Charlotte. But with Tib, Anne Belcombe and Mary, things went further. Just a few of the many journal entries. December 13th, Anne Lister, quote, good kiss off Tib last night. December 21st, Anne Lister, quote, with Anne alone in her room, dawdling and lovemaking till 3. Then went to Mary Valance, took her on my knee, held her with my right arm and grubbled with the second finger of the left. I kept it nearly still and she gave the action, so that I'm sure she felt enough. We were a goodish while at it and had only just done when Charlotte came in. So a few things about Anne Lister's lesbian nature. And then there's chapters on courtship, the separation, them being reunited, their commitment to each other on February 10th, 1834, and then the taking of the sacrament in York in March 30th, 1834. Another chapter for a 2-week spell that Anne Walker spent at Shibden. Not everybody is aware, but the reason why, as I'm sure you guys know, Anne Lister and Anne Walker took the sacrament in York was because Anne Walker was in lodgings at the time under the care of Dr. Belcombe to get treatment for her anxiety. And during the time she was in lodgings, she did go and stay at Shibden for a 2-week stay. And they also had a little trip to Richmond in North Yorkshire for a birthday treat. And that's going to be my last excerpt. Am I okay? Have I still got time to just go for the last one? Okay.
Another minute.
Okie dokie. So this is when they're on their way to Richmond. Anyway, they passed through the village of Leeming at about 5 o'clock. Then as they travelled, ate a dinner of bone shoulder, veal, ham and oranges they brought with them. Anne Lister, quote, grubbling as we came along in the carriage just before and after Borough Bridge. They arrived at the King's Head Hotel in Richmond and had tea. Anne Lister described their accommodation as very comfortable, large, excellent sitting room and bedroom adjoining. The King's Head still stands and has been providing hospitality for 300 years. In 1834, it was the hotel of choice for the nobility and gentry. I have not visited the King's Head, but it is certainly on my list. Anyway, we're booked in for my birthday meal in January at the King's Head. So that's another place where I can go where Anne Lister has been. Anyway, the last couple of chapters are, the honeymoon, the trips around the France, writing about them, traveling around France and Switzerland were absolutely wonderful. I loved writing that. Then they set up home at Shibden, which is an absolute fascination. Everything that they did and the changes and the bits they stuck here and there at Shibden was wonderful. And my book ends on, well, it takes in Christmas 1834 and it finishes on New Year's Eve 1834. And what next? Well, I'm going to carry on visiting places because that is an absolute fascination. I mean, my wife and I visited Skelfler House, Cliff Hill, Hoare End House and Langton Hall just this summer. And but you know, I'm thinking maybe my passion for Anne Lister is as great as ever, and so maybe there will be another book. We'll see.
Thank you so much, Lynn. What an exciting period of time you've had exploring Anne and Anne's destinations and just plowing through so much of her research. Thank you so much for telling us all about your book. I forgot to tell you at the beginning of this session that we would be taking questions. So if you have anything that you'd like to ask us, put them in the chat box and Chloe's going to send them on to me. I've checked a couple of things that you've asked about, and Adeline, this is directed to you from Lucia Falzari. She said, was there any part of your journey that unexpectedly affected you personally? And what aspect of the journey had the most impact on you in terms of achievement?
Lucia always has to ask me all these deep, meaningful questions that I have to think about. Lucia, you know, it's about 6 o'clock in the morning, my time.
Dig deep, Adeline, dig deep.
So what was the first part? Was there anything surprising throughout the journey?
Was any part of your journey unexpectedly, did it affect you personally? Were you surprised by what happened in the course of your journey?
Well, the whole journey was a massive surprise. I mean, geez, I never thought that I'd just dump a bag in the car and then drive off and then come home with a whole crate of beer. You know, when Ziggy died, I didn't even really think of anything. I just wanted to do something. You know, I could have sat at home and not done anything and moped, but I just felt that what Anne Lister did was really quite interesting. I didn't know anything about her as well, and it was just really by chance that I clicked on this BBC article online. The time from when Ziggy actually passed away to when I left was only about a week, and in that period of time, I basically researched her route through Germany. We didn't have a lot of interesting things or full information that we get nowadays. It was basically a few biographies that were published. So based on that, I just kind of pieced together where to go. I think in terms of really quite surprising things, I think Anne Lister's journey kind of opened up Europe to me in a very different way. I travel a lot. I've been to over 60 different countries, but when you have, you know, a manuscript or words from someone who lived so long ago, and you can compare what she saw to what you can see right now, and nothing has changed. It's actually really, really special, and it's very reaffirming. She said, she spoke about the dead bodies in the Bleikeller in Bremen, and you go there, it's basically the same thing. It's still there. All they might have right now is just a piece of glass over it, but it's the same thing. And then the nice thing about it as well is when I went down, I was the only one, because of course I have to be the earliest person to get there, because I was so excited to see these dead bodies, which I'm sure no one else would be interested in. And just to stand there was pretty amazing. Standing at the Great Belt was amazing. Just going through the same route pretty much in Germany, and then crossing the river, the water from Germany to Denmark. We didn't use the same channel, so to speak, because my ferry went from another place, but I went to the port that she went off from, and she climbed a lighthouse there, and that lighthouse is still standing. It's like one of the oldest lighthouses in Germany. So that's so cool. It's so amazing. And it's not just 1833 that I've done. I've done a lot of things, and I've had to push boundaries. I don't know why, but I've become quite competitive with Anne Lister, and if she says that she's climbed a mountain in 2 hours, I think, oh, I want to do it in 1 hour and 58 minutes, you know. And I think when I kind of practically ran up Puy de Dôme in France, I think I nearly died, because she went up a mule trail. I think she said it was 58 minutes that she did it, and I think I did it in about 39 minutes, all the way up to the end of the mule trail. So I think it's surprising what I've pushed myself to do. Generally, I think I'll be quite happy sitting in a pub drinking beer. But as a result of Anne Lister, I've just been putting on my hiking boots and going out. I think my hiking boots fell apart when I was climbing the Eiger North Face, which Anne Lister did from Grindelwald to Lauterbrunnen. So I did that as well, and it had snow on the slopes, and I nearly fell into a crevice, and my shoes came apart, and then my feet were wet, and my toes were frozen, and it was cold. But yeah, I survived.
Well, what adventures you've had, Adeline. I think we're all just a little bit jealous, or really maybe a whole lot jealous. Angela, this is a question for you. There are actually a couple, one from Chantel Smith. Angela, are you having fun working on your book number 2? Any spoilers you care to share?
I am having a lot of fun on book number 2. The only thing is now there's so much information. It was so much easier to write the first one, because also I felt like I could get away with more, because I figured back in 2016, people reading it would never have heard of her. So they'd read it and go, oh, that's cool. And then possibly research her, but probably not. Whereas now it's the opposite. And I think because I work there, everyone expects me to be this oracle on Anne Lister, but I just don't have the time. Like, I wish I had more time to, you know, I wish I could have read the diaries. And I'm so jealous of Lynn and Adeline's time to really follow in her footsteps. I'm quite Halifax based, which is wonderful. But yeah, I'd like to do more, and I would have loved to have read more of the diaries. But I think with the Meer side, the problem I'm having now is letting go because I keep hearing new things, and even at this conference I keep hearing things. Oh, I can add that. I need to stop and send it off to the publishers. So yeah, no, it's fab to write, and I've really enjoyed it. And yeah, I think having the Mariana character, like Anne Walker was in the Moss, a very contradictory character to Anne, and also somebody I think who would have called Anne out on a lot of things. Well, like, why would you do that? And yeah, and again, I think also there's a lot of, again, it's that exploration of gender and sexuality and how Anne portrays herself. And a lot of the problems with Mariana and Anne was that Mariana was embarrassed by how, I suppose you could say, how gay Anne Lister was, and quite outwardly confident with her slightly masculine side, whereas Mariana was, you know, mortified by Anne being quite butch sometimes. So again, they were never gonna kind of sit, you know, if they lived today, they'd be fine. But 200 years ago, obviously you're so imbued as a woman to be feminine and to keep your private life private. And even today, I find it, you know, it's so hard today to be yourself, you know, growing, you know, you really have to unpack how much of your life has been what create, you know, how much of society creates your identity, you know, like how you wear your hair, and, you know, what you wear. Is this me, or is this what society expects? Oh, I'm going off on one, but yeah, it's interesting to have those other two characters to explore. But I'm going to have to stop about researching now, because yeah, again, that's where writing fiction is so freeing, because you can put all the research to one side and create. So yeah, that's what's exciting, hopefully.
Angela, I think what Helena Whitbread would tell you is that you're lucky that you don't have to do footnotes.
Yes, the footnotes are non-existent. Although I feel now, again, when I was writing, I feel like I need to justify more the choices that I make, especially if anything is kind of added in from me. But I think, yeah, I've got to think this is fiction, and yeah, I need to pass it on now. I think I've done it. It's ready.
I think we have another question directed to all of us. Did you all, this is from Amanda Aikman in Everett, Washington. Did you all self-publish, and have you recouped your initial costs? So I know, Angela, you have a publisher, Blue Moose, isn't it? But I think that
Yeah.
Adeline, Lynn, and I are all self-published. So Lynn, how's that gone for you in terms of self-publishing? Are you whole yet? Are you still underwater?
It's only been about 7 or 8 weeks that my book's been published by Amazon. So but I'm still surprised by how many people are interested, and the comments I'm getting from people online. But I mean, the great thing about publishing with Amazon is it doesn't cost you a penny. You know, it's they do it all for you and give you a sizable chunk of the royalties. So, but so far, as I say, it's only been going for a matter of weeks, but it's still amazing me. Every time one gets sold, I think, crikey. But it's ticking over nicely. I think you know, it's going okay. It's going okay.
Glad to hear it. Adeline, what's been your self-publishing experience?
The biggest cost is the editing costs. It's not cheap to hire your own private editor. And of course, there's also maps and illustrations in there. So it's also not cheap to do something like that. So I had to fire my first publisher. So because they were not doing the job as I would like it to be. So I would say I'm still under, but actually I'm getting there. So I'm quite happy. And one of my friends once said to me, I've had more expensive hobbies before.
And I'll answer from my point of view. I invested quite a bit in this book because it meant so much to me. And I agree with Adeline, when you pay professionals to help you with design and proofreading and that sort of thing, the meter can run pretty fast. But to me, it's a good investment. And ideally, our books will all sell very well. By the way, while we're on the topic of sales, our books are all available on Amazon. The Book Corner in Halifax has an enormous collection of Anne Lister books. And I encourage you, if you can, to support your independent bookstore and buy locally if and when you can. I suspect most of our books are not in bookstores, but the owners and the managers can certainly order them. You know, I think that we are really bumping up against our time constraints here. So I would like to thank some people behind the scenes who really helped put this together, and that's Steph Galloway, Kat Williams, who's been our technical support, and also Chloe Natchy, who's been helping us manage time. This session will be recorded and available on the Ann Lister Research Summit website, and I believe also on YouTube, probably in a week or two. And I'm sorry to all of you who had questions that we couldn't get to. I think we could all talk about our books for the rest of the day, but chances are you may want to hear other people talking about other things having to do with Ann Lister. So on behalf of all of us, thank you so much for joining in this conversation. Our presentation is downloadable, and you'll find contact information for each of us on the PowerPoint presentation that should accompany the recording in a week or two. So do reach out to us, do buy our books, and we'll all be happily waiting for season 2, which hopefully will be here in the spring. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Janet, for sharing, and yeah, thanks for inviting me to be part of this.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Janet.